Colorado Territory, 1872. The bitter wind howled across the snow-covered plains, slicing through Yates Aldridge's sheepskin coat like a knife through warm butter. February in the Colorado Territory showed no mercy to man nor beast, but the 25-year-old rancher had seen worse in his years working this untamed land. He pulled his hat lower and urged his horse onward through the growing storm, squinting against the swirling white. "Come on, Brutus," he muttered to the sturdy buckskin beneath him. "Just a few more miles to home." The horse snorted in agreement, steam billowing from its nostrils like dragon's breath. Yates had not planned to be caught in this blizzard, but the trip to Denver had taken longer than expected. The newly established bank had required extra paperwork for the loan that would help him expand his modest ranch, Raven Creek. He had named it after the birds that had led him to the pristine valley 3 years prior. His thoughts drifted as they often did to his solitary existence. The ranch was everything to him, his purpose, his future, his entire world contained within a few thousand acres of grazing land. Yates had convinced himself that was enough. A man couldn't count on people in this world. They left, they died, they betrayed. The land remained constant if you respected it. Animals didn't lie, cattle didn't abandon you. His parents' deaths from fever when he was 16 had taught him that painful lesson. No room for sentiment out here, he reminded himself, a mantra repeated so often it had become his truth. The frontier is no place for attachments, just survival. The snow grew heavier, limiting visibility to mere yards ahead. Yates considered making camp, but instinct told him he was close to his property. Then Brutus faltered, nearly stumbling over something partially buried in the snow. "Whoa, boy," Yates pulled back on the reins and dismounted with caution, his hand resting on the Colt revolver at his hip. The object lay half-covered by fresh snowfall. Yates knelt down and brushed away the white powder to reveal a travel bag made of worn leather, its brass clasps tarnished with age and weather. Strange to find such a thing miles from any established trail. "Hello," he called, his voice immediately swallowed by the wind. No response came, but something caught his eye, a faint impression in the snow leading away from the bag like something or someone had crawled. The tracks were fresh enough not to be completely covered. Against his better judgment, Yates followed the trail, leading Brutus by the reins. 20 yards later, partially concealed by a cluster of snow-laden pine branches, he found her. At first he thought she might be dead. She lay curled on her side, her traveling cloak pulled tight around her slender frame, dark brown hair spilling out from beneath a woolen bonnet. Her skin was pale as milk, cheeks and nose reddened from cold. "Miss," Yates touched her shoulder gently, "Miss, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of summer grass. She startled at the sight of him, trying to scramble backward. "Easy now," he soothed, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you, you'll freeze to death out here." She looked young, perhaps 19 or 20, and clearly exhausted. The woman tried to speak, but her lips were too chapped and cold for the words to form properly. "Where's your horse, your wagon?" Yates asked, scanning the area for signs of travel companions. She shook her head weakly. "I'm taking you to my ranch," he decided aloud. "It's not far, you can't stay out here." When she didn't protest, Yates gathered her in his arms, surprised at how light she felt. He placed her atop Brutus, then mounted behind her, supporting her weight against his chest as he turned the horse toward home. "I'm Yates Aldridge," he said against her ear, trying to keep her conscious. "What's your name?" Through chattering teeth, she managed a whisper, Hannah Grayson." The ranch house came into view just as the last light faded from the gray sky. It wasn't grand, a sturdy log structure with a stone chimney, a barn and corrals, but it was solid and warm. Yates had built most of it himself, adding to the original hunter's cabin that had stood on the property. He carried Hannah inside, setting her gently on the bearskin rug before the hearth. The fire had nearly died in his absence, but kindling and logs stood ready. Within minutes, flames danced again, casting golden light across her features. "Can you feel your fingers and toes?" he asked, removing her sodden boots. She nodded, wincing as sensation returned painfully to her extremities. Yates brought her a blanket and a cup of strong coffee laced with whiskey. "Drink this, it'll warm you from inside." Hannah accepted the cup with trembling hands. Now that she was in the light, Yates could see her more clearly. She was beautiful, despite her bedraggled state, delicate features, those remarkable green eyes, and a small scar near her right eyebrow that somehow added character rather than detracting from her loveliness. Her dress, though travel-stained, was of good quality. "Thank you," she murmured after several sips. Color was returning to her cheeks. What happened to you out there? Where were you headed? She lowered her gaze. I was traveling to Salt Lake City. The stagecoach was robbed yesterday morning. The driver and guard were shot, the passengers scattered. I ran and hid but got turned around in the hills. Been walking ever since. You're telling me you survived nearly 2 days in this weather? Yates couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. I found shelter the first night in an abandoned mining shack. Today I tried to find the road again, but the snow, her voice trailed off. And your bag. It got too heavy. I left it when I could barely walk anymore. Yates nodded, though something in her story felt incomplete. Still, questions could wait. Are you hungry? Starving, she admitted. While he warmed a pot of venison stew, Hannah's eyes roamed the cabin. It was Spartan but neat, a table with 4 chairs, a cupboard of dishes, shelves lined with books, and a curtained-off area that must be his bedroom. No feminine touches anywhere. You live alone, she observed. Just me and the ranch hands. They've got a bunkhouse about 50 yards from here. He set a bowl of stew before her. They're good men, you'll be safe. Hannah raised an eyebrow. I wasn't concerned about my safety, Mr. Aldridge. Yates, he corrected automatically. Yates, she repeated, her voice softening. I've imposed on your hospitality enough without questioning your character. He found himself unexpectedly warmed by her words. Too many people out west suspected the worst of strangers. Her trust, however tentative, was refreshing. You'll take my bed tonight, he said. I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't. You nearly froze to death today. You need proper rest. His tone brooked no argument. Later, after showing her to his bedroom and providing one of his clean shirts for her to sleep in, Yates settled on a bedroll near the hearth. Outside, the storm howled with renewed fury, but inside, the cabin remained warm and secure. He should have felt at peace with a good deed done, yet something about Hannah Grayson left him unsettled. It wasn't just her beauty, though that was undeniable. It was the way her presence immediately altered the atmosphere of his home, as if it had been waiting for her. Such fanciful thoughts were dangerous for a man who prided himself on practicality. Temporary, he whispered to himself as he drifted toward sleep. She'll be gone when the weather clears. The morning brought sunshine and crisp, cold air. Yates woke at dawn, as was his habit, and kindled the fire before stepping outside to check on his livestock. When he returned, Hannah was awake, wrapped in his quilt and sitting by the window, watching the sun sparkle on fresh snow. She had combed her hair, which fell in gentle waves past her shoulders, dark brown with subtle hints of gold where the sunlight touched it. The sight of her there, gazing out at his land with such serenity, caused Yates to pause in the doorway. "Good morning," she said, turning to him with a smile that reached her eyes. "The storm has passed." For now, Yates stomped snow from his boots, but travel will still be difficult. "The drifts are chest-high in places." Oh, a flash of worry crossed her face. "How long before I can continue my journey?" "A week, maybe more." He busied himself with breakfast preparations. "Unless you're in some great hurry." Hannah shook her head. "No, I have time," she hesitated, "but I don't wish to be a burden." "You're not," Yates replied, surprising himself with his sincerity. "Company's welcome during the long winter." Over a breakfast of cornbread and bacon, Hannah revealed more of herself. She was 20 years old, born in Philadelphia, but raised mostly in St. Louis. Her parents had died of cholera when she was 16, leaving her in the care of an aunt. "And now you're traveling alone to Salt Lake City?" Yates questioned. "That seems unusual for a young woman." A shadow crossed her features. "I'm meeting friends there. They've arranged employment for me." The explanation seemed reasonable, yet Yates sensed she was withholding something significant. Still, everyone had secrets on the frontier. He wouldn't pry. "I should fetch your bag," he offered, "if I can find it again." "Would you?" Relief brightened her expression. "It contains everything I own." Yates left her with instructions to rest and headed back out with Brutus. The storm had transformed the landscape, but he had a good sense of direction and located the bag after an hour's search. It was heavier than expected, and something inside shifted as he secured it to his saddle. Curiosity gnawed at him, but Yates resisted the temptation to look inside. Whatever Hannah Grayson was running from, and he felt certain now that she was running, was her business, not his. When he returned, he found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up as she kneaded dough on his table. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the flour dusting the surface. "I wanted to thank you properly. You found the supplies, I see. Your pantry is remarkably well stocked for a bachelor." Yates shrugged. "Winter's long out here, have to be prepared." He set her bag near the door. Hannah's eyes darted to it momentarily, then back to her baking. "Thank you," she said softly. The next few days established an unexpected rhythm. Hannah proved herself useful around the ranch house, cooking meals that put Yates' basic fare to shame and bringing order to corners of the cabin he'd neglected. The ranch hands, three weather-beaten men named Cooper, Wiley, and Francisco, were clearly charmed by her presence at the dinner table. Despite the domestic harmony, Yates maintained his emotional distance. He'd learned that lesson from watching others destroyed by attachment. The frontier was merciless to those who grew soft. He'd seen strong men broken by the loss of wives and children to disease, accident, or violence. Far safer to focus on what endured: the land, the work, the seasons. Yet he found himself watching Hannah when she wasn't looking. The graceful way she moved, her quiet laughter at Francisco's terrible jokes, how she'd stand on the porch each evening to admire the sunset over the mountains. She carried herself with dignity despite her circumstances, whatever they might be. On the fourth day, Yates invited her to see the rest of the ranch. He saddled Brutus and a gentle mare named Penny, helping Hannah mount despite her insistence that she'd ridden since childhood. "I believe you," he said, "but Penny has her own opinions about riders." They rode along the creek that gave the ranch its name, now frozen solid beneath a blanket of snow. Stands of pine and aspen bordered rolling meadows where his cattle would graze come spring. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains stood like sentinels, their peaks gleaming white against the blue sky. "It's magnificent," Hannah breathed, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "How did you come to own such a place?" Yates rarely discussed his past, but something about her earnest interest loosened his tongue. "After my parents died, I worked cattle drives from Texas up to Kansas, saved every penny, did some trapping in the mountains, then I heard about homestead land available here in the territory." "And built all this yourself?" "Had help with the barn. The house I've added to over time." Pride crept into his voice. "Started with 50 head of cattle, now I've got nearly 300. "You should be proud," she said sincerely. "Few men accomplish so much so young." They continued riding, cresting a hill that overlooked a valley where a herd of deer foraged in the snow. Yates pointed out landmarks: the line where his property ended, the old Indian trail that summer travelers still used, the distant plume of smoke from the neighboring ranch 5 miles away. "What will you do in Salt Lake City?" he asked as they turned back toward home. Hannah hesitated. "I'm to be a schoolteacher." "Is that what you want?" She didn't answer immediately. "It's respectable work for a woman alone." "That's not what I asked." Hannah met his gaze, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes. "What I want ceased to matter some time ago, Mr. Aldridge." The formality stung, a deliberate distancing. "Apologies, I shouldn't pry." They rode in silence for a while before Hannah spoke again. "What do you want, Yates, beyond this ranch?" The question caught him off guard. "This is enough: land, livestock, a roof that doesn't leak." "No wife, no family. The frontier is no place for such things," he replied automatically. "I've seen too many men destroyed by loss." "So you choose solitude to avoid pain?" Her perception unsettled him. "I choose certainty," he countered. "The land doesn't lie or leave." "Neither does love when it's true," Hannah said quietly. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders approached from the direction of the main road, their mounts kicking up snow. "Visitors are rare this time of year," Yates remarked, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle holster. "Let's head back." But something in Hannah's posture had changed. She sat rigid in the saddle, her face suddenly drained of color. "Hannah, do you know them?" She swallowed hard. "We should go now." They turned their horses and rode quickly toward the ranch house. Yates glanced over his shoulder to see the riders changing course to intercept them. "Who are they?" he demanded. "Please, Yates, I can explain everything, but not here." They reached the barn just as the riders came into the yard. Yates helped Hannah dismount and whispered urgently, "Go inside through the back, stay there." She squeezed his arm in silent thanks before hurrying away. The lead rider was a thick-set man with a drooping mustache and cold eyes. His companions were younger, with the hard look of men accustomed to violence. "Afternoon," Yates greeted them neutrally, handing Brutus's reins to Cooper, who had emerged from the barn. "What brings you gentlemen to Raven Creek?" "Looking for someone," the leader said, his gaze sweeping the property. "Young woman, dark hair, seen anyone matching that description?" Can't say that I have, Yates lied smoothly. Been a quiet winter, why are you looking for this woman? She's my ward, the man claimed. Hannah Grayson ran away from her rightful home. I'm Silas Blackwell, her legal guardian since her parents' passing. The name sent a chill through Yates that had nothing to do with the winter air. He'd heard of Blackwell, a businessman from Denver with mining interests throughout the territory, known for ruthless dealings. As I said, haven't seen any young woman, Yates repeated. But if I do, who shall I say is looking for her? Blackwell's eyes narrowed. I think you're lying, rancher. One of the stage passengers saw a young woman heading this direction before the storm. The stage that was robbed. I heard about that, Yates kept his voice casual. Terrible business, they catch the robbers yet. Don't change the subject, snapped one of the younger men. We tracked her here. You're welcome to look around, Yates offered, spreading his hands. But there's no one here but me and my ranch hands. As if on cue, Wiley and Francisco emerged from the bunkhouse, both carrying rifles with casual purpose. Blackwell assessed the situation, clearly recognizing he was outnumbered. Perhaps we misread the trail in the snow. If you do see Miss Grayson, tell her Silas Blackwell expects her return. She has responsibilities to fulfill. I'll be sure to pass that along should our paths cross, Yates agreed neutrally. After the riders departed, Yates hurried to the house. Hannah stood by the window, watching the men ride away, her face a mask of tension. They're gone, he said, for now. She turned to him, eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry, Yates. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. It's time for the truth, Hannah, all of it. She nodded, gesturing for him to sit. Silas Blackwell isn't my guardian. He's a monster who's been trying to force me to marry him for the past year. The revelation sent anger coursing through Yates. He's twice your age. 3 times nearly, she corrected bitterly. My aunt in St. Louis died 6 months ago. Blackwell had been courting her, but his true interest was in the mining shares my father left me. When my aunt refused his proposal on my behalf, he became insistent. How did you end up on that stagecoach? He sent men to bring me to Denver. They told me my aunt had agreed to the match, but I later overheard them discussing plans for a forced wedding. Hannah's voice trembled. I escaped from his house 3 nights ago and used the last of my money to buy passage on the stage. I wasn't headed to Salt Lake City at all. Anywhere would have done, as long as it was far from him. And the stagecoach robbery. There was no robbery, Hannah admitted. Those were Blackwell's men searching for me. The other passengers scattered when they started shooting. I ran into the hills and have been trying to stay ahead of them ever since. Yates processed this information, pieces falling into place. What's in the bag that was so important you carried it until you couldn't walk anymore? Hannah hesitated, then crossed to where her bag sat. She opened it and removed a heavy wooden box. The deed to my father's silver mine in Nevada. In this, she pulled out a small leather pouch and emptied its contents onto the table, a cascade of uncut diamonds. My father was an investor in the South African diamond fields. These are my inheritance, worth enough to start a new life somewhere Blackwell can never find me. Yates stared at the fortune on his table. No wonder he wants to marry you. He doesn't want me, she said flatly. Just what I own. What will you do now? Hannah carefully returned the diamonds to their pouch. I need to reach a bank in a larger town, somewhere I can convert these to funds without raising suspicion. Then I'll head to California or Oregon, perhaps, somewhere I can be anonymous. Blackwell won't give up easily, Yates warned. Men like that never do. I know, she looked up at him, determination hardening her delicate features, but neither will I. That night after Hannah had gone to bed, Yates sat by the fire, turning over options in his mind. He could escort her to Denver, help her access a bank, and buy passage west. It would be the sensible thing to do, get her safely on her way and return to his ordered, solitary existence. Yet something rebelled against this logical plan. The thought of sending her alone into an uncertain future troubled him deeply. More disturbing still was how quickly she had become important to him. In less than a week, her presence had illuminated the emptiness of his carefully constructed life. Temporary, he reminded himself again, but the word had lost its conviction. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Yates rose early and found Hannah already awake, sitting at the table with paper and pen. Writing a letter, he asked. Making plans, she replied. The snow is melting, I should be able to leave soon. Yates poured coffee for them both. I've been thinking about that. The spring thaw brings its own dangers, mudslides, flash floods in the passes. Travel won't be safe for weeks yet. I can't impose on you that long. It's not an imposition, he met her gaze steadily. Stay until spring properly arrives. By then, Blackwell might have given up the search. Hope flickered across her face. You would do that for me, a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore, Hannah. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. February gave way to March, and winter's grip began to loosen on the land. Hannah settled into life at Raven Creek with surprising ease. She proved skilled with needlework, mending clothes and linens that had long needed attention. Her cooking became legendary among the ranch hands, who found excuses to visit the main house more frequently. To Yates' surprise, she also showed interest in the workings of the ranch itself. She accompanied him on his daily rounds, asking intelligent questions about cattle breeding, grazing rotation, and water management. When a calf was born prematurely, she stayed up all night with him, helping to keep the fragile animal warm. You're not what I expected, he admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. What did you expect? Someone more citified, I suppose, afraid of hard work and dirt. Hannah laughed. My aunt tried to raise me as a proper lady, but my father encouraged my curiosity. He said a sharp mind was more valuable than a pretty face. You have both, Yates said before he could stop himself. A blush colored her cheeks. Thank you. They fell silent, comfortable in each other's company. Yates found himself stealing glances at her profile, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the sweep of her lashes. He'd never believed in such notions as fate or destiny, yet finding her in that snowdrift seemed increasingly like providence rather than chance. The peaceful routine was shattered 3 weeks after Hannah's arrival. Yates and Cooper were mending fences in the north pasture when Francisco rode up at a gallop. Riders coming, he reported breathlessly. 6 men armed. Blackwell's with them. Yates' heart hammered in his chest. Where's Hannah? In the house with Wiley, he's keeping watch. Get back there, we'll be right behind you. As they rode hard toward the ranch house, Yates' mind raced. 6 armed men were more than he'd anticipated. This wasn't a search party, it was a small army. They reached the yard just as Blackwell and his men arrived from the opposite direction. Hannah stood on the porch, Wiley beside her with a shotgun held casually but unmistakably ready. Yates dismounted and strode forward, placing himself between Hannah and the newcomers. Mr. Blackwell. Seems you're determined to find this ward of yours. Blackwell's cold eyes fixed on Hannah. There she is, come along girl, you've caused enough trouble. I'm not going anywhere with you, Hannah replied, her voice remarkably steady. You don't have a choice, Blackwell nodded to his men who spread out, hands hovering near their weapons. I have papers declaring me your legal guardian. Forged papers, Hannah shot back. I'm of age. You have no claim on me or my property. Blackwell's face darkened. Don't make this difficult. There are ways to handle uncooperative women. Yates felt rage boil up inside him. You're not taking her. This isn't your concern, rancher. She's under my protection, Yates declared. That makes it my concern. Blackwell laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Protection, 4 ranch hands against my men. Don't be foolish. 5 against 6 aren't bad odds, Cooper remarked, his rifle now in his hands. Tension crackled in the air. One wrong move would trigger bloodshed. Yates knew his men were loyal, but this wasn't their fight. He couldn't ask them to die for a woman they barely knew. There's another way to settle this, Yates said suddenly. A legal way. Blackwell raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Hannah stays here as my wife. The words came out before Yates had fully formed the thought. We'll be married by the circuit judge next time he comes through. No guardian has authority over a married woman. Shocked silence followed his declaration. Hannah stared at him, her expression unreadable. You'd marry a woman you've known less than a month, Blackwell scoffed. For what purpose? Her fortune, I assume. For her protection, Yates corrected, and because it's the right thing to do. This is absurd, Blackwell sputtered. I won't allow it. It's not your decision. Yates turned to Hannah, suddenly aware of the enormity of what he proposed, unless Miss Grayson refuses. All eyes turned to Hannah. She stood perfectly still, her gaze locked with Yates. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a question, a possibility. I accept, she said clearly. I choose to stay here as Yates Aldridge's wife. Blackwell's face contorted with fury. You think this solves anything? I have connections throughout the territory. One word from me and no judge will perform this marriage. Then we'll find a preacher, Yates countered. Or go to Wyoming or sign a common law declaration. However it happens, Hannah stays here. For a long moment, Blackwell seemed ready to order his men to attack. Then, abruptly, his posture changed. A calculating look replaced his rage. Very well, he said smoothly. If the lady prefers a cattle rancher to civilization, so be it, but this isn't over, Aldridge. Not by a long shot. With that, he wheeled his horse around and rode away, his men following after a moment's hesitation. The tension in the yard deflated like a punctured balloon. Cooper whistled low. That was closer than comfortable, boss. Yates barely heard him. He was looking at Hannah, who had descended the porch steps and now stood before him. Did you mean it? She asked quietly. Or was it just a strategy to make him leave? The question caught him off guard. In truth, he hadn't planned the proposal. It had emerged from some place deep within him, bypassing his careful defenses. I meant it, he admitted. But I don't expect you to honor it. Once the danger has passed, you're free to go wherever you wish. Hannah studied his face, and if I wish to stay. The possibility hung in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Yates had spent years convincing himself that solitude was preferable to the risk of attachment, that the frontier was no place for love. Yet in this woman's eyes, he saw a future he hadn't allowed himself to imagine. Then I would be the fortunate one, he said finally. That evening, after the ranch hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Yates and Hannah sat before the fire, the events of the day settling around them like dust after a storm. Blackwell won't give up so easily, Hannah said, breaking the comfortable silence. He's not a man accustomed to losing. I know, Yates stared into the flames, but neither am I. You risked everything today, your ranch, your men, your life. Why? The question demanded honesty he wasn't sure he was ready to give. Yates had built walls around his heart for so long that dismantling them felt like tearing down parts of himself. When I found you in that snowdrift, he began slowly, something changed. This place, my life, it was complete before, everything in its place, everything accounted for, but now. Now, Hannah prompted gently when he faltered. Now I see what was missing, he met her gaze. You've brought light to corners of this house, this life that I didn't even realize were dark. Hannah moved closer, her hand finding his. I never expected to find sanctuary here. Or someone who would stand between me and danger, without asking anything in return. I did ask something, Yates reminded her. I asked you to be my wife. For protection, she said. Not for love. Maybe it started that way, his voice grew husky, but that's not why I want you to stay now. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Hannah's eyes searched his face, looking for truth or doubt. The night you found me, she whispered, I was ready to die. I had nothing left but those diamonds and a desperate hope for freedom. Now I have something far more precious. What's that? A future I actually want, here. With you. Yates had imagined this moment differently. More time, more certainty, perhaps some romantic gesture worthy of the dime novels Cooper hid in his bunk. Instead, they sat by firelight, danger still hovering at the edges of their world, making promises neither had anticipated weeks ago. He leaned forward and kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. Her lips were soft beneath his, her hand rising to cup his cheek. When they parted, something fundamental had shifted between them. I don't know much about being a husband, he admitted. My parents died before I could learn from their example. Hannah smiled, and I know little about being a rancher's wife, but we'll learn together. Spring arrived in earnest by mid-April. The meadows erupted in wildflowers, and calves frolicked on strengthening legs beside their mothers. Judge Parker's circuit brought him to the settlement 20 miles south, where Yates and Hannah were wed in a simple ceremony with Cooper, Wiley, and Francisco as witnesses. Hannah wore a new dress of blue calico, purchased on a carefully planned trip to town. Yates had insisted on escorts. Cooper and Wiley rode with them, weapons visible, but Blackwell made no appearance. His absence made Yates more uneasy than relieved. Their wedding night was gentle and reverent, a mutual discovery that left them breathless and wondering. Afterward, as Hannah lay with her head on his chest, Yates marveled at how completely his convictions had been overturned. I always believed the frontier was no place for love, he murmured into her hair. That attachment was a weakness a man couldn't afford out here. And now Hannah traced patterns on his skin. Now I think perhaps it's the only thing that makes the hardship worthwhile. The peace of early married life was shattered 2 weeks later when a rider from a neighboring ranch brought news. Silas Blackwell had filed a claim against Raven Creek, alleging that the northern portion of Yates' land encroached on mining rights he had purchased. "He's challenging your boundary lines," Hannah said that evening as they reviewed the formal notice. "If he wins, you lose the best grazing land and water access." Yates nodded grimly. "And without that, the ranch becomes unsustainable." "This is my fault," Hannah whispered. "He's punishing you for protecting me." "No," Yates took her hands in his. "This is Blackwell's greed, nothing more. And we'll fight it." The legal battle required a trip to Denver, something Yates had hoped to avoid. The city held too many opportunities for Blackwell to act against them, but there was no choice. The territorial records that would prove his claim were held in the land office there. They made careful preparations. Cooper would accompany them, along with 2 men from the neighboring ranch who owed Yates for helping them during a difficult winter. Hannah's diamonds remained hidden in a secret compartment Yates had built into the bedroom wall, insurance against the worst outcomes. Denver had grown considerably since Yates' last visit. New buildings lined the streets, and the constant clatter of construction echoed through the bustling city. They found lodging at a respectable hotel and made arrangements to visit the land office the following morning. "Stay close," Yates instructed Hannah as they walked through the crowded streets. "Blackwell has eyes everywhere." She nodded, her hand tucked securely in the crook of his arm. Despite the circumstances, she carried herself with dignity, her new status as Mrs. Aldridge, a armor of sorts. At the land office they encountered their first obstacle. The clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, informed them that the original survey maps for their region had been removed for review. "Review by whom?" Yates demanded. "Mr. Silas Blackwell," the clerk replied, unable to meet Yates' eyes. "He's filed several claims regarding property lines in your county." "When will they be returned?" "Uncertain, sir, Mr. Blackwell is a prominent investor in the territory's development. His concerns receive priority." The implication was clear. Blackwell's influence reached deep into Denver's official channels. As they left the office, Yates fought to control his frustration. "He's blocking us at every turn," he muttered. "Then we need to change the game," Hannah replied, a determined glint in her eye. "If Blackwell controls the land office, we need someone who controls Blackwell." That evening, Hannah revealed more of her past. Before her father's death, he had been partners with several influential men in Denver's early development. One of them, Judge Howard Whitfield, had been a family friend. "If he's still in Denver, he might help us," she explained. He never approved of Blackwell's methods, even when they served the city's growth. The next morning, they presented themselves at Judge Whitfield's offices. The elderly judge recognized Hannah immediately, rising from his desk with unexpected vigor. "Miss Grayson, my dear girl, we thought you had vanished." His kind eyes turned suspicious as he noted Yates. "Are you in some sort of trouble?" "No trouble, Your Honor," Hannah smiled, extending her hand to show a simple gold wedding band. "I'm Mrs. Aldridge now. This is my husband, Yates." The judge's eyebrows shot upward, but he recovered quickly, shaking Yates' hand with a firm grip. "Well, congratulations are in order then, but what brings you to Denver? Last I heard, Silas Blackwell was searching for you rather enthusiastically." Hannah's expression sobered. "That's partly why we're here. We need your help." Over the next hour, they explained the situation. Hannah's escape from Blackwell's forced marriage plans, finding refuge at Raven Creek, and now Blackwell's legal maneuvers to seize Yates' land in retribution. Judge Whitfield listened attentively, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When they finished, he sat back in his chair, fingers steepled before him. "Blackwell has always been ruthless in business, but this exceeds even his usual tactics," he mused. "Unfortunately, he's accumulated significant influence with the territorial government. Even I must tread carefully." Yates felt hope slipping away, "So there's nothing to be done." "I didn't say that," the judge smiled thinly. "Blackwell may have friends in government, but I have friends in the press. And certain investors who competed with Blackwell would be very interested to learn of his attempts to acquire mining rights through coercion." "You would help us expose him?" Hannah asked. "My dear, your father was one of the most honorable men I ever knew. I owe his memory that much at least." He leaned forward. "But you must understand, once this begins, Blackwell will strike back with everything he has." Are you prepared for that? Yates and Hannah exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We are, Yates answered for them both. The judge nodded. Then let us proceed, but first you'll need safe lodging. My home has plenty of room, and Blackwell wouldn't dare move against you there. Events moved quickly after that. Judge Whitfield arranged for an independent surveyor to review Yates' property documents. The Denver Chronicle published a thinly veiled exposé questioning how certain businessmen were manipulating land claims for mining interests. 3 days later, a competing investor filed a formal complaint against Blackwell for fraudulent practices. The pressure mounted, but so did the danger. Twice, Yates spotted Blackwell's men watching the judge's residence. Hannah never ventured out without both Yates and Cooper as escorts. The strain began to show on all of them as days stretched into weeks. Then came the letter, delivered to Judge Whitfield's home by messenger. It contained a simple proposition. Blackwell would withdraw his claim against Raven Creek in exchange for Hannah's diamonds and mining deed. The note concluded with a thinly veiled threat about the dangers of prolonged legal battles. He's offering a truce, Yates observed after reading the letter. He's admitting he can't win outright, Judge Whitfield corrected. The public scrutiny has made his usual tactics ineffective. This is his attempt to salvage something from the situation. Hannah shook her head firmly. Those diamonds are my future, our future, and the mine was my father's legacy. Your safety is more important than any fortune, Yates insisted, taking her hands. We can rebuild the ranch, even if we have to start over elsewhere. That's just it, Hannah replied, her green eyes intense. If we give in now, we'll never be safe. He'll know we can be coerced. This ends only when he understands he cannot control us through fear. Judge Whitfield cleared his throat. There may be another way. Blackwell's primary concern has always been financial gain. If we could arrange an alternative that satisfies his greed without surrendering your inheritance. The plan they devised was audacious but not impossible. Judge Whitfield would arrange a meeting with Blackwell, ostensibly to negotiate terms. Meanwhile, the judge's contacts in the territorial legislature would push through approval for a new railway spur that would significantly increase the value of land Blackwell already owned, land he had been trying to sell unsuccessfully for years. The railway announcement comes after he withdraws his claim against your ranch, the judge explained. He'll believe he's manipulated the situation masterfully, trading a questionable land grab for a guaranteed profit. And my diamonds, Hannah asked. Remain yours, as does your father's mine, the judge smiled. Sometimes the appearance of victory is more important to men like Blackwell than the substance. The meeting was set for the following afternoon at the judge's office. As Hannah and Yates prepared to leave for the appointment, she paused, straightening his collar with nervous fingers. Whatever happens today, remember that finding you is worth any price, she said softly. Yates caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. Nothing is worth losing you if things go wrong. They won't, she interrupted. We have truth on our side and each other. Blackwell arrived at the judge's office precisely at the appointed hour, impeccably dressed and flanked by a lawyer whose expensive suit matched his client's. His cold gaze settled on Hannah, dismissing Yates entirely. Miss Grayson, he acknowledged with a slight nod, you've led us all on quite a chase. It's Mrs. Aldridge now, she corrected calmly. Yes, I heard about your hasty arrangement. His tone made the word sound like an insult. I trust you've considered my generous offer. Judge Whitfield gestured for everyone to be seated. Mr. Blackwell, we're here to discuss a resolution that benefits all parties. Mrs. Aldridge and her husband have a counter-proposal. Blackwell raised an eyebrow. Unless it includes the return of property that rightfully should be under my management, I'm not interested. The diamonds were never yours to manage, Hannah replied. Nor was my father's mine, but we're prepared to offer you something of greater value. For the next half hour, Judge Whitfield outlined the railway proposal. Blackwell listened with growing interest, his initial skepticism giving way to calculation as he recognized the potential profits. And in exchange, I simply withdraw my claim against Aldridge's ranch, he clarified, nothing else. You also acknowledge in writing that you have no claim whatsoever on Hannah Grayson Aldridge or her inheritance, Yates added firmly. No further pursuit, no legal challenges, no harassment. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. The diamonds would have been simpler, but less profitable in the long term, Judge Whitfield pointed out. This railway spur makes your existing investments significantly more valuable without requiring you to manage new properties. A tense silence followed as Blackwell weighed his options. Finally, he nodded. Have your lawyer draw up the agreement. I'll sign once the railway approval is confirmed. Documents are already prepared, the judge replied smoothly, producing papers from his desk. My associates in the legislature assure me the railway approval is but a formality at this point. Suspicion flickered across Blackwell's face. You're very confident, Whitfield. I prefer prepared, the judge corrected. Unlike some, I believe business can be conducted honorably, with benefit to all parties. The barb wasn't subtle, but Blackwell merely smiled thinly as he reviewed the documents. After several minutes of consultation with his lawyer, he signed with a flourish. I trust this concludes our business, he said, rising. His gaze settled on Hannah one final time. You might have made a suitable wife, Miss Grayson, but I see now you lack the proper temperament. Far better suited to frontier life, I suppose. Thank you, Hannah replied with genuine warmth. That may be the most honest thing you've ever said to me. After Blackwell departed, Judge Whitfield raised a glass of brandy and toast, to unexpected victories and new beginnings. Yates felt the tension of the past week's finally release. I still can't believe he agreed so easily. Men like Blackwell understand only power and profit, the judge explained. We offered him both while preserving what matters most to you. Will he honor the agreement? Hannah asked, the worry not completely gone from her voice. He'll have no choice. The document is legally binding, and breaking it would jeopardize his standing with the very institutions he's worked so hard to influence. Judge Whitfield smiled reassuringly. Besides, once the railway announcement is made, he'll be too busy counting his profits to concern himself with personal vendettas. True to the judge's prediction, the territorial legislature approved the railway spur 3 days later. Blackwell's land near the proposed route immediately doubled in value, and his attention turned to developing commercial interests to capitalize on the opportunity. When Yates and Hannah departed Denver a week later, they left with clear title to all of Raven Creek, legal documents protecting Hannah's inheritance, and the friendship of Judge Whitfield, who promised to visit when circuit business brought him to their region. The journey home felt lighter than their trip to the city had been. Spring had fully claimed the land, turning meadows lush and creeks into rushing torrents of snowmelt. As they crested the final ridge overlooking the valley that contained Raven Creek Ranch, Yates reined Brutus to a halt. What is it? Hannah asked, guiding Penny alongside him. Just wanted to see it with you, he replied. Home. The word carried new meaning now. Below them stretched the ranch, the house with smoke curling from its chimney, the barn and corrals, cattle dotting the green pastures. But more than the physical place, Yates realized he was seeing the future they would build together. It's beautiful, Hannah said softly, more beautiful than I remembered. Yates reached across the space between them, taking her hand. When I found you in that snowdrift, I thought I was saving your life. You were, she reminded him. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but you saved something in me I didn't even know needed saving. What was that? Hope, he squeezed her hand. For something beyond survival, for a life that's about more than enduring. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Then we saved each other. As they rode down toward the ranch, Cooper spotted them and raised a welcoming shout. The other hands emerged from the barn, waving in greeting. Raven Creek felt alive in a way it never had before, not just a place of work and shelter, but truly a home. That evening, after settling back into their house and sharing the news of their victory with the ranch hands, Yates and Hannah stood on the porch watching twilight paint the mountains purple and gold. I have something to tell you, Hannah said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Something I suspected in Denver but wanted to be certain of before I shared it. Yates turned to her, concern creasing his brow. What is it? She took his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. We're going to have a child in the winter. For a moment Yates couldn't speak, overcome by a wave of emotion so powerful it left him breathless. Then he gathered her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in a gentle spin that pulled laughter from them both. A child, he repeated in wonder when he set her down. Our child. Are you happy? Hannah searched his face. Happy doesn't begin to describe it. He placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. I never imagined this life for myself, never thought I deserved it or could protect it. And now, she prompted. Now I know that love isn't a weakness on the frontier, he said with conviction. It's the greatest strength we have, the courage to build something lasting despite the hardship. The will to protect what matters most. Hannah leaned into his embrace, her head fitting perfectly beneath his chin. When you found that worn travel bag in the snow, you found more than just a woman hidden nearby. What did I find? He murmured into her hair. Your future, our future. She tilted her face up to his, and it's only just beginning. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Yates kissed his wife, marveling at the journey that had brought them together. From a chance encounter in a snowstorm to a life intertwined, their story was proof that even in the harshest landscapes, love could not only survive but flourish. Raven Creek Ranch would grow and prosper in the years to come. Their child, a daughter with Hannah's green eyes and Yates' determined spirit, would be joined by two brothers. The Diamonds would eventually fund expansions to the ranch and education for their children. The silver mine would provide security through difficult seasons. But more precious than any inheritance was the legacy Yates and Hannah created together, a home where love conquered isolation, where trust replaced fear, and where the frontier became not just a place of survival, but a place where dreams took root and blossomed into reality.